Hi, my name is Stacia Wren. I'm a senior at McMurray College. I'm in the process of completing my internship with DCFS in Jacksonville. And my presentation is on working with colleagues, the ethical dilemmas and decision-making you have to go through while in your internship. Ethics is defined as a set of moral principles that guide behavior. It's not primarily concerned with getting people to do what they believe is right, but rather with helping them decide what is right. Sometimes ethics requires us as human advocates to break the law. Examples include like the civil rights movement, women's rights, and even the Ferguson case in Missouri right now.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the LGBTQ community fight for their rights as well. These are more current examples. There are a set of ethical codes in DCFS. During my internship, I read a lot about them. As employees of DCFS, we have an ethical code to follow aside from the NASW Code of Ethics, called the Code of Ethics for Child Welfare Professionals. The goal of a child welfare specialist is not only to meet the needs of children and their families, but to also gain the trust of clients by using good judgment and fulfilling the promise set forth by the Code of Ethics. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but child welfare professionals are society's representative and attempts to meet the needs of abused and neglected children and their families. There's also a section in the Code of Ethics regarding colleagues. DCFS employees not only have their responsibilities to clients, but also their coworkers. Child welfare professionals should act with integrity in their relationships with their colleagues, treating them with respect, honesty, and fairness, and accepting the right to hold values and beliefs that differ from their own. We were all brought up in different backgrounds, and in the workplace you work with all kinds of people that have different values than you do. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a melting pot of values. My ethical dilemma that I ran into while working at DCFS had to deal with a colleague. She was doing some interesting things, and I didn't find it very ethical. So I'm going to read you a little tidbit from my journal that I wrote. Over the course of my internship, I've come to notice different styles of work ethic between employees. On one hand, there are some who excel in what they do and love their job, and others who scrape by waiting for the day to end. I've had the pleasure and displeasure of working with both. Most recently, there was a family that came into the office looking for information about a child for child care assistance. The mother was mainly coming in to vent about her displeasure of her the lady who's taking care of her child. The provider was overcharging her and could not provide proof of licensure. And she also had an assistant who hadn't yet got her license but was in the process. The mother mentioned that there were 5 kids in the home, not to include 3 of her own. So I immediately thought, well, you need the hotline number and you need to report this because there's something wrong with that. There's too many kids in the home. So while I was telling the mother this, the colleague that I had the ethical dilemma with came out and said that this was not a hotline report, it wasn't an issue, and she just unfounded a case like this last week because it was a licensure issue, not a case of harm or neglect, which I disagree with that. I think it's case of neglect. But after the parents left the building, I asked the DCFS worker if there was something I should have done differently. She kind of just shrugged me off. So I approached my supervisor about it because I felt like I had done the right thing and she had done the wrong thing. According to the NASW Code of Ethics, Section 2.1, Parts A, B, C, and D, Social workers should take adequate measures to discourage, prevent, expose, and correct the unethical conduct of colleagues. Social workers should be knowledgeable about established policies and procedures for handling concerns about colleagues and unethical behavior. Social workers should be familiar with the national, state, and local procedures for handling ethics complaints. The reason I went to my supervisor is because of all of these. Policy plays a big factor in this situation because DCFS has almost a policy for everything except cell phone usage, which I find comical. The policy that applies to this situation, DCFS Employees Ethics Manual under section 1.3 states that a child welfare professional should provide services only within the boundaries of their competence based on their education and training and supervised experience and professional experience. I am an intern, clearly. I have had little supervision and little experience, but with me being correct in this situation and the colleague with more experience than me being incorrect, it was definitely a necessity to seek supervision. My ethical process, ethical decision made, choosing how to handle my situation. In every situation, one must choose how to handle their dilemma. By approaching my supervisor, I made a conscious decision of how to handle my situation. Successes were potentially helping the client and learning how to work with different personalities and people with different ethical values. And the struggles were being thrown in the middle of a situation and the animosity it caused in the office between me and the colleague. How I plan to continue. This situation has taught me how important policy actually is. Not only policy, but ethics play a role in delivering the policy accordingly. In DCFS workplace, all employees have come from different backgrounds, but things such as policy and code of ethics are there to guide employees to make good judgments. How I plan to continue, although down the road I may not work for DCFS, it would be necessary for me in whatever job I have to learn policy and apply critical reasoning and ethical reasoning in order to best serve my client base. Are there any questions?
Well, I have one. So if you think about the situation that happened, in the principles that you read from the NASW Code of Ethics, ethical principles, remember, guide our behavior or actions.
Right.
What values do you think are underneath that principle that you were thinking about when it comes to the ethical actions of colleagues? What value then would be supporting that?
Integrity.
Integrity.
And competence.
Okay.
Because integrity proves that you're trustworthy enough to handle a situation, and competence basically means that you have the education and you have the credentials to work through the problem.
Right. And so really, when it came down to working with this colleague, at the fundamental level, you were questioning those values that
Right.
she was inherently showing in those actions then.
Right.
And then the supervisor found that to be enough information
Right.
to make some changes with that
Mhm.
client. So as a student intern, right, finding an ethical issue, taking it to your supervisor, and that supervisor having it pretty much be founded, I know to use DCFS language, what was that like for you then in the office with the culture of the people? Did things shift for you?
Yes, it did.
Tell me a little bit about the culture.
For a couple weeks, people thought I was actually planted in the office as a spy, which wasn't true, obviously.
Right.
And I mean, it's actually just within the last 2 weeks gotten better because I had another colleague actually stick up for me.
Huh?
She said, you know, maybe Stacia was here, she was used by management to basically call you out, and it wasn't her fault, which that was kind of what happened. I kind of got thrown in the middle of it, and so now the other colleague has been coming around more. She's been being nice to me.
Okay.
It's interesting.
It's
It's interesting how personalities like clash.
Right. You're still working with people while helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll not only see social work, and I think we've noticed this in your journals as I write back to you, you have to think you're a social worker for the clients that come in, but sometimes you have to be a social worker with the peers that you work with, the colleagues
Right.
that you work with as
Right.
well, and kind of constantly be thinking that way, which is why a good supervisor is so important. A
Mhm.
supervisor that can help you really process that out, or colleagues that are in the field,
Right.
that have been in the field, that can kind of work with you on a different level so that you can get your self-care in as well,
Mhm.
right?
I've definitely discovered, I think the biggest thing that I've learned from my internship is that supervision is key. If you
Mhm.
have a good supervisor, you're going to want to do the work for them. You're going to want to do the work. You're going to be motivated to do the work for your clients. If you have a supervisor that kind of just lets you do your daily tasks and doesn't really check in with you or push you to become something better, then you kind of fall to the wayside.
Sure, absolutely.
If you don't have any guidance by you there.
Mm-hmm. So anything you would do different, or would you do it the same?
I don't know that I would do it much different.
Okay.
I think what I did was right. I think me going to my supervisor was the right thing to do.
Okay.
Maybe I would have, I don't know. No, I wouldn't change what I did.
Okay. All right. That was all the questions I had.
I don't know. I've been really excited about this internship for you because I feel like you did have really good supervision, and I think that, we kind of worked through a lot of stuff, together, and I was really happy about this internship. Very successful.
Great. All right. Good job. Thank you.